Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, or iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan. Alright, I am back, unfortunately just for a day. Because you know how my schedule doesn't typically work out with things like this, so... But I was on spring break this week, so I did plan to get a lot more. I planned to get a podcast in every day, and it just didn't work out. You know, I had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the last 4 days. I was supposed to have a track meet on Wednesday. So I was kind of trying to stay away from the podcast stuff the 2 days before Monday and Tuesday. Then it got moved to Thursday, so I waited again. And then yesterday I finally did have the meet. So obviously I wasn't going to get into podcast at that point. Yeah, pretty much after this, I think that's... It's very possible this is the last podcast until the summer starts, where I do finally get, that's my best season as far as podcasts go. Summer is where I finally get on the schedule 5 days a week, doing a podcast. Fortunately, it is not summer yet, so I'm going to stop rambling the same way I always do at every podcast. The main focus today is the NFL draft, which is closer than I actually thought. Kind of similar to how my last podcast was pretty much all about the Super Bowl. Yeah. So, the NFL draft, there's a lot of variables always, teams can trade up and... they can trade down, they can make a pick that no one expected. And honestly, the thing with the draft is, I feel like everyone is so certain about some players. So certain that someone's going to be a bust or someone's going to be an incredible success. But honestly, I think the draft might be one of the, a player's success in the NFL might be even harder to predict than the Super Bowl. Who's going to be in the Super Bowl the next year. And that, you're picking two teams out of 32 in that case. But with a player, there's 1,000 different things that can happen to them in their career. They can get a career-ending injury. They could just simply be a backup their entire career. They could get dropped within their first 3 years. They can get traded within their first 3 years. There's so many different things that can happen to players. It's just impossible to predict. And with draft teams in the draft, you never know what you're going to do. You do your best to make a prediction just based on the reports you hear, but you never know what's going on in the front office. But anyway, there's a few teams I think in the first few picks that I believe will make are in position to make a move. The Chargers might move up a bit. I mean, the Chargers are in a unique position because they're a good team. But there are certain positions that they lack in. Their O-line can use some work. They don't have a viable tight ends, but, they do have Justin Herbert, so that's always good stuff. But yeah. The Jim Harbaugh edition, I like it, but don't take my word for that because I also liked the Urban Meyer hire, and that just didn't go over well. But, the Chargers, they might make a move. I mean, they're in a completely different spot than they were last year. but oddly enough, they're kind of in need of the same positions. The Giants are an interesting team. I think my contention is that they'll move off Daniel Jones because I feel like especially at this point with the big contract he has right now, and his salary hit, it would be a good time to move off of him. And honestly, he really hasn't had a very successful season, and you just lost Saquon Barkley. You're going to need a quarterback that can actually... they made the playoffs last year, but Daniel Jones threw 15 touchdowns. Saquon did most of the offensive work. So, now that Saquon's not there, you may have been able to use this year, last year's draft, they were able to use the excuse that, Daniel Jones worked with what we had. Well, now you don't have Saquon, so that's a big difference from what you had and what you currently have. So now I'm assuming the Giants have to be thinking. The Giants have to be thinking that Daniel Jones, his most successful season, or our most successful season, was when Daniel Jones did less work. If Daniel Jones has to do more work, we're probably going to have a pretty crappy season. So we probably should look to draft somebody. Draft a quarterback. The problem is where they are positioned. It'll be hard not to reach for a certain quarterback, because I think the general consensus is the first three teams are going to pick a quarterback. Washington, Chicago, and the Pats. They're all projected to pick a quarterback. So, obviously they're not going to Caleb Williams. He's going to go first. Whether or not the Bears take him or not. Or if the Bears just trade down. But then Drake May is probably going to go second. And then the third quarterback's up for grabs. They can consider a Jaden Daniels maybe. But, listen, their team isn't horrible. I just don't think... It's just the quarterback is such an important position to... a quarterback's not something you can be uncertain about. You have to know what you have at quarterback in order to evaluate your team. And if you're unsure of what Daniel Jones can do, and you have a doubt, I don't think he's the guy. And in their case, they've had a doubt about Daniel Jones for 5 years now. You got to be thinking at this point. I get you can keep him, but he might be a good backup. Some quarterbacks are just better off as backups, but Daniel Jones, he's clearly not a starter or franchise quarterback in this case. And like I said, the Giants, they have some pretty good players on defense. They have a decent O-line that can work if with the right offensive pieces, but clearly they're in need of a running back, but it's not a running back heavy draft. So, I would try to see if you can get a quarterback. But if they're not, if they don't feel Jaden Daniels or a Bo Nix, I wouldn't take them as high because the Giants have the 6th pick. So I would not take Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix that high. I would trade down because they're not getting Drake May unless they attempt to trade up with Washington, which I don't think is going to happen. I think Washington's pretty set in stone with what they're going to do. So if I'm the Giants, I either look... I don't look on the defensive side. I look for either I look for either a wideout, maybe an O-lineman, or their other choice is to move down maybe and look for a Jaden Daniels or a Bo Nix. Trade for some more picks as well later in the draft, like a second or third rounder. But yeah, they're in a tough spot, the Giants. There's a lot of things they can do. The Titans, they got the 7th pick. I would look to get an O-lineman for them. It's just, they're also in a pretty crappy position because it doesn't look like Will Levis is a good quarterback even. Like, we're not even talking great. I don't think he's even a good quarterback. He's like a C+, in my opinion, as a quarterback. But the thing is, you can't move off him just yet. Because it wasn't like a situation where he was so bad that you get rid of him year one. That's like, you gotta be really, like, on a different level to get dropped through year one. So they're going to give him another shot. But if they're going to, I think they have to give him a fair shot, get him some O-linemen, get him some weapons, and see what he does with that. The Falcons, I don't see why they would go anywhere but Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. They're going to give Desmond Ridder another shot. Their offense isn't half bad, but they haven't had a good pass rusher since Vic Beasley. So, I think for them, and honestly, the top 7, I don't see the top 7 really going the defensive route. I don't see anyone in the top 7 taking Dallas Turner. So I think the Falcons should have a pretty good shot. The Bears, they're in a really complicated spot. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think it's going to be the right thing because they're the Bears. But it seems like they're going to move off Justin Fields and take Caleb Williams. So if they do that, they keep the number 1, take Caleb Williams, probably look to move off Justin Fields later on. And they got the 9th pick right now. So assuming all that happens, and they're sitting at 9, with Dallas Turner off the board, and all those other picks. The Bears, honestly, I think what they should do, if they go Caleb Williams, if they stick with the number 1 pick and take Caleb Williams, I honestly think they should look they're going to, and I think they should look defense. Because their weapons aren't as bad as they seem. They have 2 good wideouts. I would look maybe an edge rusher, a corner, and worst case, they could trade this pick and get like second or third rounders to get the edge rushers and corners. They have a chance to make a good roster. It's just the Bears' history isn't exactly rich. But, if I'm them, and the reason I think they will go with defense is because they got Matt Eberflus as their head coach. He's a very defensive head coach. So I'm sure he'll be in the front office begging for them to take a defensive guy. So I could see them drafting Caleb Williams. And then at 9, if they don't see a player they like at 9, I would trade that pick to move down for some like second and third rounders, and focus on getting edge rushers maybe a corner, and like secondary positions. The Vikings, I think, are going to. I think I can really see them taking J.J. McCarthy at this point. They would have to move up for that, but yeah, and honestly, I'm going to get into it later on why I think Minnesota is the best spot for any quarterback to land in this draft, but that's for later. Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's pretty simple. Just move up and draft a quarterback. Now that Kirk Cousins is on the Falcons, and I believe I actually said something about Desmond Ridder earlier. I apologize for that. That was a big mistake. Yeah, so if the Falcons, their offense is not in a bad spot at all. Their defense is in a really bad spot, though, so I think they're going to get Dallas Turner. The Broncos, I could see them moving down for a Bo Nix, maybe. Because I think 12 is a little high for Bo Nix. So I can see them moving down to take him. Because they're going to go quarterback now that they just got rid of Russell Wilson after that disaster happened. They have Courtland Sutton, who's a pretty solid receiver. But, yeah, I wouldn't go... If they're going to go Bo Nix, I wouldn't go 12 for him. I think that's way too early. All right. So now I'm going to get into why I think Minnesota is the best landing spot. I think, honestly, and this could go down to be one of the dumbest takes ever, but I don't really care. I'm throwing it out there. I think it's kind of like Mahomes falling to the Chiefs, I mean, that's kind of the extreme because Mahomes has had a phenomenal, once-in-a-generation career with the Chiefs. But I think you get the point I'm trying to make. Trubisky, Watson, they all landed with crappy franchises. The Bears, the Texans, Mahomes got the Chiefs, who, although they don't have... I think they have one Super Bowl before Mahomes came, obviously. But they're a pretty successful franchise. They make the playoffs. With Alex Smith, they were making the playoffs on a regular basis, but not really doing anything with it. But they, all things considered, I mean, I can assure you they were much better than the Texans and Bears have been the years prior to that. But, yeah, so think about it. In 2020... I generally think that the more hype there is around a quarterback draft class, the worse it is. Because in 2020, there was not a lot of hype around the quarterback draft class outside of Burrow and Tua. Even Herbert wasn't being hyped up a lot, even though he turned out to be the best out of them. But look at how all those guys are doing. Burrow's doing well. He made a Super Bowl. He damn near won. Tua got Pro Bowl votes. He's looking pretty good. Jordan Love just had a solid season with the Packers. Jalen Hurts made a Super Bowl. And like I said, Justin Herbert looks like he's the best out of all of them. So, yeah, so that draft class, it wasn't hyped up, like I said, outside of Tua or Burrow, but it turned out pretty good if you ask me. And then 2021, there was a lot of hype. Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, a lot of hype surrounding those guys. Zach Wilson is a backup right now to a 40-year-old man, as no disrespect to Aaron Rodgers, but if a team is desperate enough to trade for a 40-year-old man to bench you, I don't think you did too well. Justin Fields isn't really working out too well. Mac Jones is certainly not working out. He got benched for Bailey Zappi. Trey Lance was a swing and a miss, and Kyle Trask isn't even hasn't even started a game. So that draft class, all the hype surrounding it, only Trevor Lawrence has had a semi-successful start to his career. Now, I look to the level of hype surrounding the draft class. Like, that's how I explain the difference in success between those two classes of quarterbacks. But it also could be this. The guys in the 2020 draft class all landed with offensive-driven head coaches. Jordan Love with Matt LaFleur, Burrow with Zach Taylor, Herbert, I forget who the coach was there at the time, but, who was it? This is going to kill me. I think it was Anthony Lynn. I think he was the coach when Herbert was there. But yeah, he was more of an offensive coach. And then, he started off with Brian Flores, but think about it, he wasn't very successful with Brian Flores. But when Mike McDaniel came in, an offensive coach, that's when Tua found success. The guys that landed in the 2021 draft class, most of those guys landed with defensive coaches. Wilson with Robert Saleh, Fields with Eberflus, Mac Jones with Belichick. The only two guys that didn't land with an offensive guy or a defensive guy was Trey Lance, who got Kyle Shanahan. And then Kyle Shanahan slowly lost belief in him. And then Kyle Trask hasn't even gotten a chance yet, so. But yeah. So all those guys that weren't successful pretty much had defensive coaches, head coaches. But all the guys that were successful had offensive-minded coaches. And that's why I think Minnesota, with Kevin O'Connell, is the best place for a quarterback to land. You get, especially with the way that offense is right now, if you're a quarterback and you're looking at all the teams with a high round pick, I don't think you want to go to the Bears as a quarterback because they haven't had a good quarterback ever. I don't think you want to go to the Pats because they're a little bit of a mess right now. Don't think you want to go to the Commanders, who just got Cliff Kingsbury, who completely flopped in Arizona. Don't think you want to go to the Giants. Then there's the Vikings. I mean, there is also the Broncos, but they're also kind of in a mess right now after what just happened with Russell Wilson. But then you got the Vikings. They have Justin Jefferson, a great number one receiver. They just got Aaron Jones. A little bit up there in age for a running back, but he's still probably going to be very productive. Jordan Addison, an up-and-coming receiver. And Kevin O'Connell, who is an offensive-minded head coach, seems to be pretty knowledgeable. And yeah, they had a decent year last year. They went 7-10. But that might be, the best place to start. I mean, think about it. The Bucs, and I'm not saying Minnesota's going to win the Super Bowl with the rookie quarterback. They're not. I'm saying once that quarterback develops, is there any reason that they can't? Because as I just said, Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Addison, Kevin O'Connell, progressive head coach, and then if you get the quarterback right. So if I'm a quarterback, I want to go to Minnesota. All right, so the big news over the weekend was that the Bills traded Stephon Diggs to the Texans. I got to say, as far as trades go, this was kind of. I think everyone knew it was going to happen. Like, everyone knew Diggs was not happy in Buffalo, and they were eventually going to trade him off. But I don't know. I'm just not feeling Buffalo this year at all. And I know that's kind of a basic take, but like, I feel like they've just done this ever since Josh Allen had that breakout year. They've kind of had the same thing each year. They meet the Chiefs in the divisional round, they lose. They get into a shootout and lose, pretty much. I don't think anything is ever going to beat what happened 2 years ago. What was it, like 45-40 or something like that? But they pretty much get into a shootout with the more experienced Chiefs and they lose. You know, they just feel a little bit weaker each year. And, especially this year, they just lost Diggs, the number one receiver. They lost Gabe Davis, too, so forget about him. You know, and as far as the other side of this goes, I think Diggs will do well in Houston. Obviously, a much smaller role, I think, with him, because he has Nico Collins and Tank Dell taking some load as well. But, the Texans obviously benefit the most from this deal. I don't see how the Bills really benefit at all. Other than the fact that they dropped Diggs' contract. But, what the Bills can do and how they can mitigate this tremendous loss is it's a wide receiver heavy class. And there are some pretty good alignment in the draft class as well. So focus on drafting skillful wideouts and reliable alignment, because you're going to need Josh Allen to get some protection back there. And you also need him to have some weapons in the receiving core as well. So Buffalo isn't out yet, and I trust them to, because I do think they have a pretty well-run front office. So I do trust them to make the best out of a pretty crappy situation at the moment. But the Texans are going to have a good year next year. They were a big surprise this year, obviously. Probably the biggest, making the playoffs off of having a rookie quarterback who did a lot better than, admittedly, I thought he would. Because typically Ohio State guys don't do too well in the NFL. It's like I said a lot when Mac Jones was getting drafted a few years ago. You know, those guys at Alabama and Ohio State don't know what it's like in the NFL because they are put in a dreamland. You know, Mac Jones had Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Najee Harris. And the best O-line in college football. And the best defense. So, of course, he looks good. I think I would look good in that offense. You know, so, yeah, admittedly, I thought the same with C.J. Stroud, but he did very well last year, and he now has Nico Collins, Diggs, and Tank Dell, so they should be pretty damn competitive next year. All right, the last topic of the day is not related to the draft, actually. Damn. Anyway, the NFL is having 2 games on Christmas Day this year. The only thing fans are complaining about is that it's on a Wednesday. Not sure why that matters. I really don't, because either way, those fans that are complaining are going to watch the game. Like, you're going to complain about it, but then you're going to proceed to watch the entirety of the game. Because I think a lot of sports fans would much rather watch an average NFL game than an NBA playoff game. The NFL is... I mean, all right, I have a stat to put into perspective how much viewership they drive in. All right, 28 million people went to Peacock, a streaming service, to watch a wild card playoff game. 28 million people went to Peacock to watch a wild card playoff game that wasn't even good. It was a blowout. It was 26-7. I think most people know what game I'm talking about. It's the Dolphins and Chiefs in the wild card this year. 28 million people watched it on Peacock, and it wasn't even... It was not even close. It was 26-7. The Chiefs dominated. And on top of that, it's a wild card game. It's not like it's a Super Bowl. It was a wild card game. So, you could say, oh, it's on a Wednesday. You're going to watch it. All right, what else are you going to do Christmas Day? You know, the NFL wouldn't have games on Christmas Day if it wasn't popular for them. They would see the ratings and realize, oh, this isn't working out. We should axe this. But that's not the case. The ratings for games on Christmas Day are always doing well. So, all right. That's all I have to cover for today. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan. I don't know. I'm not. Should I even? I'll probably see you guys. I'll tell you this. I'll see you guys once the summer starts, and if you see me before that, it'll be a nice surprise. So, all right. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan. Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, or iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan. Have a good day. I will see you guys later.